The golden lights of Aunt Darlene's Houston Estate ballroom flickered like 1,000 tiny judgments, refracting off the chandeliers and dancing across the polished marble floors. I stood near the punch fountain, a silent silhouette in a sea of power suits and designer gowns, my forest green satin dress understated but elegant. At 34, I was Juliana Wynn, just another face at the Chandler family's annual winter gala, where laughter was too polished, compliments too rehearsed. The air smelled of wealth. Citrus perfume, expensive leather, roses trucked in for the evening. I clutched a glass of sparkling cider I hadn't sipped in 10 minutes, my eyes scanning the room, not for connection, but for clarity. "Juliana!" Aunt Darlene's voice cut through the hum like a flute played too sharply. Her pearl earrings swayed as she tilted her head, her smile more appraisal than warmth. "Still working as a secretary at that tech place?" "What's it called again?" "Crestline Dynamics," I said evenly. "Executive assistant to the CEO. She laughed lightly, the sound tinkling like the crystal above us. "Darling, you're far too smart to fetch coffee for someone else. You should be running something by now." I nodded, my smile just polite enough to pass. I didn't tell her I was running something. That 2 months ago, Crestline's board had quietly appointed me interim CEO after a sudden resignation. That yesterday I'd finalized a $200 million 0-cents acquisition that would reshape our market position. I wasn't here to impress. I was here to watch. "Yes." My cousin Reed swaggered over, one hand in his tuxedo pocket, the other twirling a bourbon. He'd recently been named vice president of outreach at Chandler Holdings, a glorified title for someone who golfed more than he worked. "Heard Crestline's hiring," he said, nudging me with his elbow. "I can pull some strings. We need admins and legal." I took a slow sip of cider. "Thanks, Reed. I'm happy where I am." He smirked, his eyes glinting with that Chandler superiority. Happy is for people who've stopped trying. Maybe he was right. I had stopped trying to prove myself to them. Their version of success never included someone like me. I glanced across the ballroom, where the Chandler legacy hung in oil paintings. Chandlers in suits, Chandlers at ribbon cuttings, Chandlers on magazine covers. Mine was coming soon, just not the way they expected. 12 years ago, at 22, I'd sat in Uncle David's walnut-paneled study in this very house, a flash drive full of business models and fire in my chest. Fresh from Stanford, I'd pitched a consultancy to help minority-owned startups scale using AI-backed market analysis. Uncle David leaned back, unimpressed. "Consulting's risky, Juliana." Aunt Darlene laughed. "Honey, you'd make a wonderful executive assistant. You're the organized type." I smiled through their laughter, nodded when they said, "Maybe next year." That night, I slipped off my heels and stood barefoot on my tiny East Austin apartment balcony, the dry Texas air swallowing my whispered promise. I'll build something so big, they'll pretend they always believed in me. Now, here I was, Crestline's new CEO, quietly confirmed, publicly unannounced. The ink on our $200 million 0-cents deal with a global logistics firm still drying. The PR team drafting my Forbes profile. Reed and Aunt Darlene could keep their smirks. Soon they'd host another gala, and my face would be on the invitation. But I didn't build it for applause. I built it because I had to, because their dismissals were fuel, their doubts, the shovel I used to dig my own path. I called it Allura Strategies, a name meaning height in Spanish, a nod to the places I'd reach. It started above an auto body shop in East Austin, the kind of place that smelled of grease and ambition, thin walls, rattling AC, internet that barely held during video call, just me, a laptop, and grit they never saw. My first client was a struggling coffee roaster teetering on bankruptcy. I pored over their invoices, renegotiated bean contracts, rebuilt their wholesale model from scratch. When their revenue jumped 22% in one quarter, word spread through Austin's startup scene. By 25, I felt the spark of something real, something mine. But I stayed in the shadows, letting partners front deals while I orchestrated everything. Legal structuring, growth plans, investor decks. My name wasn't in headlines. That was by design. Allura grew fast: Denver, Nashville, Phoenix. Each branch a quiet victory, each contract a reminder I wasn't the girl laughed out of Uncle David's study. To the Chandlers, I was still Juliana, the assistant, the disappointment, the invisible one. That didn't bother me, not when I was helping real people like the team at Riverbend act, a family-run equipment company in Missouri, on the verge of being gutted by a Chandler Holdings buyout. When I saw Uncle David's name on the acquisition papers, everything changed. It wasn't just about growth anymore. It was about integrity. While Chandler Holdings stripped companies for parts, Allura helped them breathe. I built a private research unit within Allura, confidential and fast-moving. They tracked Chandler's patterns: a shipyard in Galveston, a spice brand in Tucson, a solar firm in Nevada. We reached out before Chandler could close. "Let us review your books first. There might be a better way." Many said yes. We worked miracles: 90-day plans, cash flow triage, strategic pivots. Most never sold. They thrived. Every time we saved a company, it balanced the scales. But I never said a word, not to clients, not to my team. To them, I was Jules, the operations lead who never missed a deadline. In quiet moments, after late-night strategy sessions, I'd walk through Allura's Austin headquarters, glass walls humming with impact, my reflection in the windows showing not a secretary, but a woman shifting the tide. When Riverbend Act came under direct threat, I knew it was time to step forward. Their land, legacy, and 50 employees were about to be swallowed by a Chandler shell company. I couldn't watch it happen. Our team built a counteroffer, swift, airtight. We'd invest in Riverbend, not absorb them, keep their people, scale their innovation. We had the capital thanks to our $200 million 0-cents partnership. The morning of the Riverbend meeting, I stood at the head of Allura's top-floor boardroom, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Austin skyline, cranes, sunlight, movement. My tailored indigo suit felt like armor, 10 years of quiet winds pressed into every seam. Kane, my executive assistant, laid out the files with a smile. "They're all downstairs," she said, "press included." For the first time in a decade, I wouldn't be behind the scenes. I'd walk in as Juliana Wynn, founder and CEO of Allura Strategies, not for revenge, but for every ignored voice, including mine. At 8:45 a.m., the Chandler Holdings delegation arrived at Frost Towers conference level. Uncle David, Meredith Chandler, Reed. They didn't recognize the woman at the table's head. To them, I was the forgettable niece who fetched coffee at family parties. I stood, buttoned my blazer, and met their eyes. "Good morning," I said evenly. "I'm Juliana Wynn, CEO of Allura Strategies, and I'll be leading today's meeting." Meredith's fountain pen slipped, hitting the table with a clink. Reed's smirk froze, his jaw tensing as he flipped open his notepad. Uncle David blinked, squinting like my name tag would change what he heard. "You?" he asked. "See?" I nodded, letting the silence stretch. "You never saw me because you never bothered to look." Kane distributed proposal folders, each sealed with Allura's gold crest. Inside, our merger offer for Riverbend, backed by a 35% share acquisition secured through private placement. I recited our strategic blocks: Greenridge Textiles, Solar Vista, EchoScan Medical. All transactions they'd attempted, all stabilized by Allura. The room stilled. My voice was steady, each word landing with purpose. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here to reclaim dignity, lost to ruthless takeovers. David's face didn't move, but his temple veins betrayed him. Reed muttered about regulatory scrutiny. Meredith whispered, "She's been in the room this whole time." I leaned forward. Sign the merger agreement, retain partial benefit, or wait. In 10 days, I'll complete the open market acquisition of Riverbend's remaining shares. Allura will hold control, with or without you. David pushed back his chair, storming out. Kane leaned in, paused the meeting. "No," I said. "Let them feel the shift." 15 minutes later, Reed returned, jaw set, fire gone. He sat. He signed. His pen scratched like a reluctant surrender. I nodded respectfully, gathered my folder, and walked into the hallway, the Austin skyline gleaming through the glass. Spring wind rushed through the atrium doors, sharp and electric. I didn't feel cold. That afternoon, Allura's valuation soared 17%. Chandler Holdings slumped 8.4%. My name hit Bloomberg's evening crawl. Juliana Wine, the enigma behind Allura's ascent. I didn't relish their humiliation. That moment was for every person told to stay quiet, every business owner bullied into signing away their life's work. 3 weeks later, Allura's 31% stake in Chandler Holdings entitled me to nominate a board candidate. I didn't hesitate. The boardroom was colder than the AC, a long walnut table, 12 chairs, 12 sets of eyes unsure whether to flinch or fake a welcome. I walked in. Ivory pantsuit, heels clicking with certainty. Their legacy was stitched into the wallpaper, but I carried earned power, quiet, undeniable. Reed was absent, sidelined by legal inquiries from a failed acquisition scheme. I stood at the front, my voice even. Chandler Holdings will no longer strip businesses to the bone. We'll rebuild them with integrity, with intention. Silence, then slow applause, awkward but real. A week later, Meredith emailed, "You did the impossible. I'd like to learn from you." I saved it, unread but not deleted. Uncle David resigned the next month, his handwritten letter raw. "I misjudged you, Juliana. You've shown us a better way." I folded it beside my first investor contract, reminders of battles won through vision, not vengeance. At a Houston finance conference, I passed Uncle David in the lobby. He gave a small nod, no words. These weren't trophies, they were tremors. Signs a system ruled by extraction was learning to listen. Back at Allura's office, I stood by the window overlooking Lady Bird Lake, bridge lights shimmering like stars in water. I hadn't built this to destroy my past. I'd built it to rewrite the future. The media found me, front pages and financial segments, but I chose my moments. At a 2025 DC Gala, I accepted the Strategic Innovator Award under a sky so clear it looked unreal. I scanned the crowd, suits, scholars, changemakers, and smiled. 10 years ago, I began, my family laughed when I said I wanted to build a consulting firm. They told me to marry smart, not build bold. The crowd laughed with me, warm, knowing. I listened, just not the way they meant. More laughter, then stillness. Success isn't this award or evaluation. It's a message from a student saying, "I didn't think I could until I saw you." The applause thundered, long and alive. Invitations flooded in, business schools, summits, women's forums. I accepted carefully, not to bask, but to share the truth. Late nights in spreadsheets, mornings of doubt, choosing shadows until I was ready to lead in the light. In every audience I saw someone, a young woman, a quiet voice, reminding me of who I was. That's why I launched the Altitude Fund, a venture capital initiative for women-led startups. Former assistants, single mothers, night shift nurses turned tech founders. Not just dreamers, doers. My heart swelled not for Allura's size, but for the dreams we ignited. One morning, a plain white envelope arrived, hand-delivered, marked for my eyes only. Uncle David's letter. I thought business was power and control. You showed me humanity. I'm stepping down permanently. I'm sorry. I sat, coffee warm in my hands, not triumphant, but reflective. Real change had come, not just in me, but in the system that confined me. I tucked the letter into Alora's strategic journal, where we log our biggest shifts. Sometimes justice arrives not with noise, but with a signature and a quiet apology. The first Altitude Fund roundtable felt like a sunrise. Around me sat women no one had bet on. Nurses, teachers, immigrant founders, their voices clear, bold. We weren't just rebuilding businesses, we were rebuilding belief. I saw my journey in theirs. The sting of being overlooked, the quiet strength to rise. Alora was no longer just a firm, it was a signal fire, calling to anyone told they weren't enough. My legacy wasn't in headlines or valuations, but in the courage I helped awaken, the permission I gave others to dream fearlessly. 3 months after the Chandler boardroom, my life was unrecognizable. No more hiding behind titles or shadows. I was Juliana Wynn, a symbol for the dismissed. The world saw me, but I stayed grounded, choosing purpose over prestige. At a New York summit, I told a crowd of young women, "Power isn't handed to you, it's built, brick by quiet brick, even when no one's watching." Alora thrived, but the Altitude Fund was my heartbeat, supporting women launching ventures like wildflowers after a storm. Once the girl mocked for dreaming too big, I rose, not to prove them wrong, but to show you can rise too. The ballroom lights still glittered in my memory, but they no longer judged me. They illuminated the path I'd carved, a path I'd walk again, not for their approval, but for the ones still finding their way. Subscribe to follow Juliana's journey, from shadows to spotlight, where resilience rewrites legacy, one bold move at a time. Her story isn't over, neither is yours. Join us as the truth steps into the light. The Austin skyline glittered beyond my office window, a constellation of cranes and glass that mirrored the ambition pulsing through Alora's headquarters. It was 7 a.m., 3 months after the Riverbend victory, and I sat at my desk, a steaming mug of black coffee in hand, staring at a single email that had arrived at midnight. The subject line was blank, the sender a name I hadn't seen in years, Leela Monroe, my first mentor, the Stanford professor who'd seen my potential when I was just a wide-eyed undergrad with a dog-eared notebook. Her message was short, cryptic. "Juliana, you've climbed the mountain, now comes the harder part, staying there. Call me." I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking softly. The world saw me as Juliana Wynn, the enigma who'd outmaneuvered Chandler Holdings, the CEO whose name now graced Bloomberg and Forbes. But Lila's words stirred something restless in me, a reminder that every peak has its precipice. Success wasn't a destination, it was a tightrope, and I was only just learning its sway. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind. Alora's valuation had climbed another 12%, fueled by the Riverbend deal and a new wave of clients, small businesses, family legacies, startups with dreams too big for their budgets. The Altitude Fund was gaining traction, with applications flooding in from women across the country, a biotech founder in Seattle, a sustainable fashion designer in Atlanta, a former teacher in Detroit building an ed tech platform. Each story felt like a thread in a tapestry I was weaving, one that stretched beyond profit margins to something deeper, impact. But the higher Alora soared, the heavier the crown felt. My inbox overflowed with interview requests, speaking invitations, and partnership pitches. The board wanted me to announce my permanent CEO role publicly, complete with a press tour. Investors were circling, whispering about IPOs. And then there was the chatter on X posts, speculating about my next move, some calling me a visionary, others a fluke who'd gotten lucky. I didn't read them, but Kane, my assistant, kept me updated. "They're obsessed with you," she'd said yesterday, half laughing. "You're trending again." I didn't want to trend, I wanted to build. but the world doesn't let you stay quiet once it knows your name. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a text from Marcus, Allura's CFO and my closest ally in the C-suite. Board's pushing for the IPO vote next week. They're getting impatient. You ready for this? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. An IPO would mean billions, global reach, a chance to scale the Altitude Fund beyond my wildest dreams. But it also meant scrutiny, shareholders, a life under a microscope. I typed back, "Not sure, need to think." Marcus replied instantly, "You've got this, Jules, but don't wait too long." I set the phone down and stood, pacing to the window. Lady Bird Lake shimmered below, its calm surface belying the current beneath. I'd built Allura to be a force for good, a shield for the overlooked. But what if growth changed us? What if I lost the soul of what I'd created? The memory of Leela's office at Stanford flashed in my mind. Bookshelves stuffed with economic theory, a whiteboard scrawled with equations, her sharp eyes cutting through my nervous pitch. "Juliana," she'd said, "ambition is a fire. Feed it carefully or it burns everything down." I hadn't understood then. Now I felt the heat. A knock at the door broke my reverie. Kane poked her head in, her tablet glowing with the day's schedule. "Morning, boss." "You've got the Altitude Fund pitch session at 9, a call with the Denver branch at 11, and... Ooh, CNN wants a sit-down next week." "Again," she raised an eyebrow. "Also, there's a woman downstairs insisting she see you. No appointment. Says her name's Sofia Delgado." I frowned. "Delgado? Don't know her. What's she want?" Kane shrugged. "Wouldn't say. Just that it's urgent and Juliana Wim will want to hear this. She's got that desperate look, like she's been up all night." I glanced at my watch, 20 minutes until the pitch session. "Send her up. 5 minutes." Kane nodded and disappeared. I straightened my blazer, a tailored charcoal piece that felt more like armor than fashion, and braced myself. Desperate visitors weren't new. Allura's reputation drew dreamers and schemers alike, but something about Kane's tone set my nerves on edge. Sofia Delgado entered like a storm cloud, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, her eyes bloodshot but fierce. She was maybe 40, in a wrinkled blazer and jeans, clutching a manila folder like it was her lifeline. "Miss Wynn," she said, her voice low, urgent. "I'm sorry to barge in. I'm with Delgado Farms, a citrus operation in South Texas. We're about to lose everything." I motioned to the chair across my desk. "Sit." "Talk." She didn't sit. "Chandler Holdings is back. They're targeting us. Lowball offer, predatory terms. They know we're struggling after the drought. My family's run that land for 3 generations. If we sell, they'll gut it for a logistics hub. If we don't, they'll bankrupt us with legal fees." Her voice cracked, but her gaze held steady. "I heard what you did for Riverbend. You're my last shot." My stomach tightened. Chandler Holdings. Even after Uncle David's resignation, their machine kept churning. I leaned forward, hands clasped. "Why me? Why not a lawyer?" Sophia's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Lawyers can't stop a tidal wave. You can. I've read about Allura. You don't just save businesses, you rewrite the game. My family's not just a business, it's our blood." I studied her, the folder trembling in her hands, the defiance in her eyes. She reminded me of myself at 22, standing on that East Austin balcony, vowing to prove them wrong. "Leave the folder," I said. "I'll review it today. No promises." She exhaled, setting the folder on my desk like an offering. "Thank you. That's all I needed to hear." She turned to leave, then paused. "Ms. Wynn, people like me, we don't just need money. We need hope. You give that." The door closed behind her, and I sat frozen, Sophia's words echoing Lila's warning. Hope was heavier than money, and I was carrying it for more people than I could count. I opened the folder, financials, land deeds, a chillingly familiar Chandler Holdings offer letter. My jaw clenched. They hadn't learned. But neither had I stopped. The pitch session at 9 a.m. was a blur of bold ideas and nervous smiles. 5 women, each with a startup and a story, a nurse from Oakland with a telehealth platform for underserved communities, a single mom from Tulsa building eco-friendly packaging. Their passion lit up the room, but Sophia's folder burned in my mind. I nodded, asked sharp questions, promised follow-ups, but my thoughts kept drifting to Chandler's shadow creeping back. After the session, I called Lila. She picked up on the second ring, her voice warm but pointed. "Juliana, took you long enough?" "Lila, I'm drowning," I admitted, the words spilling out. "The board wants an IPO, the media wants my soul, and now Chandler's back targeting another family business. I can't do everything." She laughed, not unkindly. "You're not supposed to. Leadership isn't carrying the world, it's choosing which battles matter. You saved Riverbend because it was personal. Is this Delgado Farms the same?" I hesitated, picturing Sophia's trembling hands, her fierce eyes. "It's not just them, it's the pattern. Chandler's still preying on the vulnerable. If I don't stop them, who will?" "Then that's your battle," Lila said. "But you can't fight it alone. Delegate, Juliana. Trust your team. And for God's sake, decide what Allura stands for before the world decides for you." I hung up, her words sinking in. Trust. I'd built Allura from the ground up. Every contract, every pivot, every win. Letting go felt like betrayal. But Lila was right. I couldn't carry it all. I buzzed Kane. "Get Marcus and the research unit in here, now." By noon, we had a plan. The research unit would dig into Chandler's latest moves, mapping their targets. Marcus would handle the IPO talks, buying me time to focus on Delgado Farms. I'd review Sophia's financials myself, build a counter-strategy. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. That evening, I stood on Allura's rooftop terrace, the city humming below. The air was warm, tinged with the promise of spring. I thought of Sophia, of the Altitude Fund founders, of the girl I'd been, whispering promises into the Texas night. The crown was heavy, but I'd chosen it, and I'd carry it, not for glory, but for the ones who needed hope most. The fight with Chandler was far from over. Their machine was wounded, not dead, but neither was I, and this time I wasn't fighting alone. The sun dipped below the Austin horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet. I stood alone on my office balcony, the city's pulse syncing with my own. Allura Strategies was no longer just a company. It was a movement, a beacon for the overlooked, the underestimated, the dreamers told to stay small. The Altitude Fund was blooming, its first ventures taking root in cities from coast to coast. Sofia Delgado's farm was still in play, our counteroffer gaining traction, a small but fierce stand against Chandler's shadow. I had risen from the ashes of doubt, not to bask in the spotlight, but to light the way for others. The battles ahead, Chandler's next move, the IPO decision, the weight of a world watching, would test me. But I'd learned something on this journey. Power isn't in the crown you wear, but in the hands you lift up. My phone buzzed, a new email from a young founder in the Altitude Fund. "Miss Wynn, I saw your DC speech. You made me believe I could do this. Thank you." I smiled, tucking the phone away. That was enough for tonight. The stars emerged, sharp against the Texas sky, each a reminder of the promises I'd kept and the ones still to come. I wasn't done climbing. Neither were they. Subscribe to follow Juliana's fight, where every victory is a step toward a world where no dream is too big. Share your story below. Let's rise together.